From just 60 houses, 161 men signed up to fight for their country. No surprise that Chapel Street in Altrincham became known as the bravest street in Britain. When those who'd survived the horrors of the Somme and Ypres came home, they came home to a hero's welcome. Thousands lined every inch of Altrincham, as these remarkable pictures show.
I mean, there was 61 houses, and altogether 185 men enlisted. 30 of those were sadly killed, and some died later of their injuries later on.
Jane Southern's granddad, Joseph Wyatt, lived in Chapel Street and joined up in 1915. It's the first time she's seen the Chapel Street celebrations.
They just all look so happy. Proud, I suppose. Proud to be serving for their country. It's amazing to see this. It makes you feel quite choked, actually.
In Chapel Street, there would have been a lot of people living in one house, so as well as the family, perhaps the extended family, so there might have been some overcrowding. Certainly after the Second World War, the houses were pulled down because they were in such a terrible state, so it's possible that during the First World War they were also in quite poor condition.
The Chapel Street men fought with honour and distinction in France.
We think that it was possibly on the Somme. And he was injured in 1916 on the 25th of August and came home and was nursed in Edmonton in London at the Queen Alexandra Hospital.
On April the 5th, 1919, after the war had ended, the Earl of Stamford unveiled the Chapel Street Roll of Honour. But life was tough for those who returned to Blighty. Work was hard to come by, and upon further research from Jane, Joseph Wyatt's story doesn't have a happy ending.
I found his death records, and the first thing I did was found where he was buried. And I was a little bit disappointed to find it was an unmarked grave. But it's only been in the recent few months that I've realised why it's an unmarked grave. And it was a pauper's grave, which seems awfully sad when you think of what he did for his country.
Chapel Street no longer exists today, but there is a blue plaque to mark where it was. And you may be able to knock down a building, but it's a lot harder to erase the history of what was Britain's bravest street.
It's just so important that we remember these people. I mean, they gave their all. They couldn't give any more, and they suffered appalling conditions in the trenches and overseas, not just in the Western Front, but at other theatres as well. Appalling conditions.
And finally, is it possible that Jane Southern's granddad, Joseph Wyatt, and this soldier on the Chapel Street film are one and the same? We know he lost several fingers on his left hand during the war, and is this him covering up his left hand on his army pace stick? And as he parades through Altrincham, is this the same tall, slim man that Jane has a cherished photograph of? Sadly, we'll never know for sure.